This is Hammett.
And Jessica.
And you're listening to the Friendly Atheist Podcast. Please go to patreon.com/Friendly Atheist Podcast. $5 a month. You get bonus episodes. You get ad-free episodes. And you support Dottie, I think. And apparently you're like broken legs based on Twitter feeds and stuff. Are you alive?
Oh, yeah. No. I'm fine. On Saturday, I fully fell down the stairs I live in a townhouse. So I was going to bring my dog out and I just missed the last stair and just beefed it, y'all. Like, I hit the ground hard. And I was just like in shock phase of like lying on the ground. Like, I don't know if I'm hurt. My body hasn't told me yet. I don't know. You never fall over, right? Because you don't do anything active.
That's right.
I'm a world-class faller. I'm a dancer. I'm a horseback rider. I fall all the fucking time, so I'm very good at it. Anyway, the next day I went into the urgent care near us, and I have a sprained right half of my foot, of my right foot, like the outside, and then a sprain.
Another podcasting injury.
A sprained big toe on my left foot. I have more stories about that I am going to tell you on. No, there's a very charming anecdote that will make me come off as winning and not obnoxious for the when we talk in the bonus episode.
Okay. I was debating where to begin, and I think this is the story that kind of made me the most happy, so we're going to start there.
Oh, not used to this.
I know. There was a Republican. Texas had its primary elections this week, and there was a woman running. She's a Republican running in the Republican primary for a state Senate seat.
Okay.
And her name is Bianca Gracia. I think I'm saying it correctly. Not Garcia, Gracia.
Gracia,
and
okay.
She said on her campaign website, you know, she's trying to beef up her conservative bona fides, right?
Sure.
She's a homeschooling mother
of
a couple kids. She said she's not a politician,
No.
not in all caps.
And don't let her running for office steer you wrong. She's not a politician.
Not a politician. She says she is a constitutional Christian conservative. Though actually the whole
a constitutional Christian conservative?
Yeah. All three.
Is she implying she's like a constitutional scholar or just she is an originalist?
I'm pretty sure that means she's read to the Second Amendment and skipped the first one and she's good now.
Yeah.
And actually the funny thing is like, she said, I'm not a politician.
No.
And like the weird way she emphasized, I'm totally not a politician. Here's what she is. She was the statewide Hispanic engagement director for the Republican Party of Texas.
Okay.
She was state director for the Faith and Freedom Coalition. She was president of a group called Latinos for Trump. Precinct chair in Harris County. Like, you're not a politician because you weren't elected to office, but pretty much she's done everything else that a politician. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, whatever.
What did you say? Latinas for Trump?
Latinos for Trump.
Oh, Latinos.
They don't do the endings.
Well, no, they couldn't.
Don't you dare.
They couldn't depend on having enough Latino women. So they're like, Latino, let's just cover them all. We'll cover them all.
But here's why she's on the radar. Because ever since she first announced her candidacy for the state Senate in December, like one of the first interviews she did with a right-wing media outlet, she said, and I'm quoting here, "I've conquered it already. It is mine. I am claiming the victory."
Oh.
Like, there's confidence, and then there's, no, don't worry, I've already won this race.
Yeah, I feel like there's a Shakespearean speech about God told me I won, so I won. I could be making that up, though.
Then later on, like now we're in January, and she goes on another right-wing
Did she
show.
stop then? I'm sorry. Did she quickly stop having to like do any of the campaigning stuff because she's already won?
You would think, and yet she kept going.
I bet it's God said she's on the right track to win.
It's not what
Stay
she
the
said.
course.
Not what she said. She said, "I'm literally am running against the establishment," says this president of the leader of the Republican Party of Texas.
Yep, not
but she
okay.
says, "But the Lord told me you're going to the Capitol and you're gonna make these walls shake and you're gonna make the devil run." I'm gonna keep quoting her here because it gets more interesting.
Okay.
"You ain't taking my guns. You ain't going after our faith. You ain't going after our family. And let me tell you something.
What?
I will fight to the death because if that's what my ancestors did, I will do it. Nancy Pelosi, you can come and take it." She's running for state Senate. Nancy Pelosi has nothing to do with that. Sorry, I'm still quoting. Okay. "I would like to see her call me down to that Capitol. I've got a few words for her and all her little cronies. And believe me, I'm taking a whole bunch of pastors with me because I got a whole bunch of pastors now. I said, we're going to go perform an exorcism in there.
What is the context of these?
I have no idea anymore, but she's picking a fight with Pelosi.
Sure, as one does.
Who has nothing to do with the Texas State Senate.
And really isn't in like the firing line right now of the Republican Party, I don't think as much. Like Joe Biden is kind of like, I feel like because there's a Republican in office.
Yeah, it would be AOC
Pelosi
at this point. Pelosi's
yeah.
not their boogeyman as much anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not as much. Like, you would still think.
Wait, so she's threatening to bring a bunch of pastors to Washington, D.C.?
I don't know.
Because if she's a state senator, she'll be going to Austin.
Yeah. I don't know where this exorcism is going to take place.
Okay.
But whatever, she's going to win, so something's going to happen.
Sure.
But then,
so she won her primary?
Well, now we get to closer to the election.
God told her, sorry.
I mean, I know God's going to win, but she went on another right-wing show and said, I finished an interview with some pastors, and I told them, I said straight up, I'm only going to win if the church shows up. That's it. If you do not show up, then you will be held accountable because I have been appointed and assigned for this position, and God is testing you all. I don't have anything else to say to you other than that. So you're going to either have to show up and show out, or you're going to have to deal with it with the Lord.
Oh my goodness.
So now, not only, even though she already won the race, according to her, she needs Christians to show up to the polls, but also if they don't, God's coming after them. So she needs to threaten the voters.
Seems like a pretty black and white situation. So we can prove God exists in her mind.
It's a twofer.
If everybody goes to vote for her, God's real, and if a single person doesn't vote for them, God will come after them.
Yes.
And so we'll know God's real then too.
God's not dead 7 plot right there.
Yeah. Well, I guess really the only thing is everybody could vote for her, and thereby we have no way of knowing how God would smote a person who voted Green Party or whatever.
She wins either way.
Smitten.
But the bottom line here is she went from saying I've already won the race to I need Christians to show up so I can win the race to, oh no, some Christians may not vote for me. You're all going to burn in hell if you don't.
They really love to bring out that Trump card. Forget the term
God
of
card.
the just like, oh, you're not going to vote for me. That's fine. See ya in hell, motherfuckers. I do love that final thing.
Which always amuses me because when they say I'll see you in hell, where are you going,
You're
buddy?
You're going to see me there?
So how did she do in Tuesday's primary? The Republican primary, mind you. There's no Democrats here to complain about.
God, I hope she didn't win.
She did not win.
Yay.
She lost by, let me count this, 40% to another Republican.
40%? I feel like in a primary, that's a pretty... do you know how many?
In a crowded primary.
That's my next question. In a crowded primary?
In a crowded primary, the winner, whose name is Mays Middleton, who is actually a Texas House representative, he decided to run for the state Senate.
Mays?
Instead of Mays, M-A-Y-E-S. But basically, he's like, I'm already a House elected official. I'm going to run for the state Senate in this district. He won the primary with 56% of the vote.
Ew, so did she even break double digits?
She got 16.7% of the vote, but also she did not get 100% of the vote.
While that is, it's a strong showing in your first primary.
For someone who's not a politician but happens to hold every political office.
She's not a fucking politician. If you say she is again, God will smite you, I swear to God. What a mess.
Man. So I have questions now. Was God lying to her? Did she lie to everyone?
Yes.
Did she misinterpret what she thinks God told her? I would love to hear her answer, even though I can't imagine a single reporter will ever ask her about any of that.
Have we talked about the term eyes open and eyes closed fraudsters?
No.
Okay, I think I just heard about this on Ona Ross and Carrie, and it's really helped me verbalize something I've thought about a long time. And this is a very good example of that, of an eyes open fraudster versus an eyes closed. What's this person's name?
Gracia.
Gracia. If Gracia genuinely believed God spoke to her and she was relaying that message, even though she's still wrong, it's eyes closed. She genuinely believes that, but eyes open implies she knows this is all bullshit. She knows nothing is real, but she's just going to tell everybody. So, like, your Peter Popoffs are eyes open.
Yes.
But, like, maybe your, strip
Maybe
mall
she's
psychic
just
is eyes
deluded.
closed and
Maybe
just genuinely
she's just-
believes it. And I think it's an interesting
And I would
way
like
to
to
view the
know.
world.
That's a fair point. I would love to know which one it is. I
think
don't know the
people
answer.
tend to be I genuinely think people like this who are listening for messages from God are going to hear them. Like, I have all sorts of bonkers dreams, and if I woke up and was like, oh, weird, like, Hammett and Dottie switch heads, that means that Dottie should be the new co-host of Friendly or whatever. Like, you can interpret anything out of anything. That's why, like, we study literature and art, because everything's up for interpretation. But if you're like, well, I woke up and in my dream, God is like, hey, you should run for Senate and you'll win. And she wakes up like, well, I had this dream. So, of course it's true, because that's what she's been told to believe. If she dreams something clear enough, it's a message from God, and don't doubt it.
I
Unless it's
sometimes
wrong.
post videos of so-called Christian prophets saying crazy things, and people sometimes get mad in response, and they're like, there's an example. There's one woman, Kat Kerr, who keeps saying, like, oh, I've been to heaven. Let me tell you what heaven is like. And you're rolling your eyes, and that's the right response.
Right.
But she knows everything about heaven, and there's the guy asking her questions, and he just goes along with everything.
Of course.
But people are like, stop posting clips of that woman in particular, and they're like, clearly she has a mental illness or something, and you're mocking her. And my response is like, no, she doesn't. I've never seen anything that suggests that. I think she's genuinely deluded, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But also, I don't think I don't necessarily know if she's making it up and knows she's making it up, like you said, the eyes open version of that, or if she genuinely thinks her dreams are real, or whatever it is. Either way, it's insane to me. But in the case of this woman, Gracia, I have no idea which one it is, but I was looking to see what she wrote on social media. Like, did she talk about, like, maybe God had different plans for me or something? No.
You just don't acknowledge it.
I assumed she would just ignore it altogether
Sure.
and hope everyone forgot all the stuff she said.
And
No, she's blaming voter fraud, of course, because she is Republican. And the best part is you can't blame
voter fraud.
You can't blame Democrats for taking this from you because it was a GOP primary.
whom is she accusing of voter fraud?
The Republican elite did it! Exclamation point.
And I'm sorry, she's running for state senate in Texas?
yeah.
And is this like even a major district?
It's a district. It's in Harris County, which is a Democratic stronghold, but it doesn't matter when you're the Republican on the ticket.
Of course.
Like,
of course.
for this
I was
sort
just
of
curious,
thing.
like, is this like in Austin, or is this like in the middle of the plains? And like,
It's not in the middle of nowhere.
okay.
It's a busy area, but
Okay.
blaming Republicans, of which
Classic.
she was the precinct chair for Harris County, a precinct leader.
Oh my God, I didn't
She knows how elections work in the area.
Do you think this is going to go away?
No.
No?
No, it's so easy to say, no,
so-
Republicans can't possibly lose
I have
unless
to-
someone cheated.
I have to think that, I mean, I don't know. Okay, I'm just going to think out loud. My initial thought was that it's impossible for somebody to be like, oh, these people, like Republicans, the people I want to win are losing time and time and time again. What does that mean? Or what is that? Like, there's no way they can think they're all rigged. Like, how can you look at a Republican primary and say
Think
it's
about who their
rigged?
voters are.
are
Of course, you can always say it's rigged.
Oh, you're just saying they're not bright enough or incredulous enough to not believe everything. But it's truly like 10 years from now, every local election
Yes.
somebody loses, they're going to
Yes.
call it voter fraud. Every
Yeah.
school board thing in Kansas, everything. To what end? Like, isn't there going to be, to me, that is, it's going to be January 6th again.
Well,
like,
it's the
if
amusing
everybody
thing to
thinks-
me about this is you can't blame it on Democrats taking it from you,
Right.
which makes this really intriguing. 'cause,
That's
like,
what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, it's who stole it from you? The other conservative Republicans who also believe the voter fraud
Yeah.
lies? Like, who are you attacking
Or like
here?
the powers that be who are really rigging state senator elections for Texas, like as if
Yeah.
that is what people
Yeah.
have in mind. Like
It's stupid. And also, apparently,
foolish.
if her voters couldn't make their votes count, somehow it didn't hurt the conservative who beat you.
Yeah.
Like you would think.
But I mean, this is the thing that's making me like cuckoo bananas crazy, because okay, imagine you're in this town where they're voting for Gracia versus what Henry is the white guy's name? I don't know. I'm going to call him Henry. Gracia and Henry. And they're both conservative, Christian, Republicans.
Yep.
So if somebody who voted for Gracia and she didn't win goes into, down to the corner store or the bar or whatever and says, oh, fucking Gracia didn't win because these motherfuckers are rigging the system. And the guy next to him, who they agree on 85% of shit, is like, no, my guy won. It wasn't rigged. Like, to me, like, if you start infighting.
Glorious infighting. Because, you don't have an argument and the whole,
it's impossible.
They stole it from me falls apart.
Who can you blame if they all essentially agree?
Yeah, I know.
Because this isn't like AOC versus a really moderate Democrat that we're trying to get it. Like, these are all equally terrible people who are going to make equally terrible decisions.
Yes.
You're looking forward to it.
I mean, I don't know what else to tell you other than, you're right. The whole argument breaks down. It doesn't make any sense. It didn't in the past also.
Do you think it's just they've talked themselves into, I'm being cheated, I'm being cheated, I'm being cheated. So every time they don't get something they want, I'm being cheated?
It's their whole mentality. They think they're owed everything. And the second it doesn't work, it's like, I got to blame someone else. It's the Republican way.
Yeah, because they ran out of black people. They ran out of immigrants. Like when you run out women, black people, immigrants, queer people out of your party, you really like lose people to blame things on. So like, what are you gonna say now? It's the poor Republicans or the rich Republicans?
It's my favorite part about this. This woman who ran pretty much every aspect of the Republican Party in Texas is blaming the Republican elite for keeping her down in a race she lost by 40 points.
40 points
to another conservative Republican.
Much.
Yeah. It wasn't
so
close.
Much.
Right,
especially in a crowded field.
Let's talk about Pat Robertson, who stopped by for 2 minutes.
Die?
Nope.
Oh.
Still alive. Just dead on the inside.
90-ish?
90-something.
90-something.
But so 91. He retired, remember, from the 700 Club like a few months ago, saying I'm stepping back. Yep. He's not entirely gone. He still shows up on the show.
Now he's windboarding with a backwards hat.
Yeah, exactly. So he showed up on the 700 Club this week to do like a little quick commentary on Ukraine and Russia. And
you know what? I was really hoping I would hear Pat Robertson's take on Ukraine and Russia's situation.
Everyone was waiting.
Finally.
Everyone was waiting for him to resolve everything. And here's what he said. This is posted by Right Wing Watch. And I think this clip has like over 2 million views already, which is bonkers. Because that's how much this resonated. Because it's Pat Robertson chiming in on the biggest global conflict of the day.
So nervous.
And saying something batshit crazy.
Oh, God.
I think you can say, well, Putin's out of his mind.
Yes.
Yes, maybe so, said Robertson. But at the same time, he's being compelled by God. He went into the Ukraine, but that wasn't his goal.
What?
His goal was to move against Israel, ultimately.
What? Wait, is that true?
That's what he said.
I don't know a lot about international politics. It's admittedly a weak spot. Is there any part of that that's true?
No.
Great.
Basically, Robertson is saying the end goal is to go after Israel and launch this like end of the world Armageddon fight, which will hasten the return of Christ, because that's how the end times work when you're crazy.
So he thinks that Putin is acting as an active agent of Satan to bring on nuclear war so Jesus could come back.
Something
knowingly.
like that.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I have no notes on that.
Yep. And he stopped by. He stepped out of retirement just to make that very clear to everybody.
Good Sir Robinson. Oh, boy.
By the way, the Washington Post made very clear this idea that, we're about to enter a big global conflict and the end of the world is getting near and we can embrace it because Jesus is coming back in a way. He has been saying this since at least at first 1980 when he said at
Before
the time.
Before both of us were born.
I guarantee you by the end of 1982, there is going to be a judgment on the world.
And then Hemet was born, and judgment was placed.
And he wrote in a 1990 book that the end of the world would come on April 29th, 2007. It did not.
April 29th, 2007, I was in college, probably drinking.
And he also said in October 2020, and this is one of the ones where it's like, you got it right, but I think you got lucky on this one, where he said, God told me Donald Trump would win the election and that an asteroid would destroy Earth afterward.
Could you imagine how nice that would have been?
I know.
Oh, the dream.
I know. I'm still dreaming for it.
Back to star stuff. I'll see you soon, Carl Sagan.
So, Robertson added, watch what's going to happen next. You read
This
your
is
Bible.
1990?
Nope, this is today.
Okay.
Watch what's going to happen next. You read your Bible because it's coming to pass.
Can't wait.
Thanks, Pat.
Just looking out for that asteroid, boy. If that is coming, you let me know. We'll have a parade for it.
Yeah, Don't Look Up scenario happening right away.
I still watched Don't Look Up. Should I watch it at this point?
No. It was fine. I watched it because I felt obligated to.
Well, it was really zeitgeisty, and then I missed it being zeitgeisty, but now I feel like it's just sort of like a hole in my. But I shouldn't ask you about this. You're Swiss cheese when it comes to pop culture.
Yeah, I saw it, and already I've forgotten most of it.
Well, yeah.
It was meh. We didn't talk about this last week. We mentioned last week Ketanji Brown Jackson got nominated for the Supreme Court, and that was kind of the end of the conversation because it happened like earlier that day when we recorded.
Did we even talk about it? I don't think we did. I think it was this week that...
Whatever.
Okay, it doesn't matter.
In any case, after she got nominated by Joe Biden, this was the thing I saw her say during her formal nomination when I think Joe Biden said he's going to select her, and then the date, and we talked about that briefly, but then the next day he formally had the press conference, announced her nomination, she made a quick speech. And again, I just want to point this out. Everything about her resume seems solid. She has not weighed in on church-state separation cases. In the line of work she's done.
Okay.
She was a public defender. She's been on the Washington, D.C. circuit, which does not really do culture war type of issues.
Oh.
It's the second highest court, everyone says, in the land, but really it doesn't do that type of case.
Someday could you do like a 20-minute explainer of how courts do and talk to me like I'm a really dumb child?
The way it works is you just keep fighting until the conservatives on the Supreme Court get your case and give you whatever result you want. That's how the legal system works.
I understand how you think that was helpful, but I cannot explain how very little help you are to me.
Sure. I mean, the thing relevant here...
Like, how do these circuit courts rank? Is it just by geography?
Yes.
Okay.
There are...
So, like, Southern District of New York is a big one.
No, that's a different thing altogether.
Well, fuck me. I don't know. What am I doing on this show?
In terms of the appellate courts, which is usually where the Supreme Court nominees tend to come from.
Because
it's the step right below the Supreme Court.
Okay.
Like, a lot of the cases, theoretically, that get to the Supreme Court is because one of the appellate courts said one thing, and another one said something totally different. And now you have two courts of the same technical stature saying different things. You need the Supreme Court to wade in and sort it out. But the problem more recently is that a lot of conservative lawyers are like, we don't need an appellate court to look at this. Hey, Supreme Court, just check out my case right now. And they've basically said yes to several of them.
Oh, that's so weird that rich people get their way.
There are some appellate courts like the Fifth Circuit, which covers Texas, which are notoriously conservative and have so many conservative justices that even when like a handful of them get randomly picked to see your case, it's probably 2 or 3 conservatives out of 3. So if you're a conservative lawyer, go through Texas to file your case, get it, because if you don't like the ruling, you get to appeal to your buddies on the Fifth Circuit.
So is it mostly geographical? So
Yes.
if we were to sue each other today,
and it was a federal lawsuit, and it got through the district court
level. And so say I won and you appeal because you're a bad loser.
By the way, I hope everyone knows neither of us are lawyers, so you should totally ignore everything we're saying.
Well,
continue.
Listen.
Yes.
Okay, so I sue you, I win.
Yes, in
you
district
appeal.
court.
Opposite.
I
don't think you could.
And it goes to the appellate court that covers Illinois and a couple other states, I think, in the Midwest.
So our county court would go straight up to a district court. There's no like.
Sorry, no, we're starting over.
Okay.
These are federal lawsuits that concern federal crimes. There's a district court at the lower level. As opposed to state courts, as opposed to county courts. Those are different issues.
Oh.
So it doesn't matter for the purpose of this conversation.
I feel like I've really tipped
Here's
my
what you
hand
need
that
to know.
I'm not as smart as people might
It's all
think
good.
I am.
The appellate court that covers Texas is very conservative.
Okay.
Historically, the appellate court that covers like California and the West Coast is relatively liberal.
Okay.
Though because of Trump, because of
Sure.
the way Republicans have handled nominations for those seats, some of that stuff tends to change.
Someone
and
can
that's
send me like
scary.
a flow chart. It would be really helpful.
But like, remember when Under God and the Pledge was a big controversy and it got to the Supreme Court back in the day, like 20 years ago? that went through the Ninth Circuit because 2 out of 3 judges said, yeah, this should not be happening.
And the Ninth Circuit is the
notoriously liberal California
one.
Whereas if you're trying to do like Christian nationalism type of culture war issues, you want to go through Texas because your buddies are right there.
I've never regretted asking a clarifying question more in my entire life.
So anyway, the thing is, if you were trying to nominate a Supreme Court justice, you want someone who's sitting on those high up appellate courts that handles a lot of these significant issues.
Okay.
And what did Biden do with Ketanji Brown Jackson? Like, Obama's the one who nominated her to a district court back in the day. That's like the first tier of federal courts. So what did Biden do as soon as he got into office and finally had the ability to do stuff? They're like, get this woman on an appellate court right now. And they moved her as soon as possible. She was one of the early nominees to the Washington, D.C. circuit, which covers that area. But the thing is, they don't really handle culture war issues because you're going through the liberal courts or the conservative courts. So she does a lot of like white collar crime type of business type of lawsuits.
Okay.
And the one that's gotten attention is one that involved like, I forgot the specifics, but it was a Trump criminal investigation type of thing. And she said, you can't hide your shit. Like, no, you got to keep going. Okay, that's kind of the only controversial decision.
Wait, that was controversial.
Because all the other ones have been pretty mundane. No one cares. No one's writing blog posts about the rest of the decisions.
Do you know why? Beyond the fact that she's a black woman, which Biden
said he would
do. Do you know why this particular judge they're so like fucking stoked about? Because I know there's a short list of.
Her history involves she's a public defender. In terms of resume boosting, like Harvard pedigree, law review pedigree, like, man, the checklist of the resume is awesome.
It's like she's been becoming a Supreme Court justice for her whole career.
Yes, and she clerked, she was the clerk for Stephen Breyer on the Supreme Court, too. Like, again, she checks every box on the list.
Passing of the baton.
And she's a public defender at one point in her career. And she gave up, like, a money-making corporate law gig to become the public defender and do stuff.
Okay.
So, I say all that to say, great pick. We don't know how she is technically on church-state separation because I cannot point you to any decisions she's written that dealt with the sort of things we talk about. But she seems like a solid nominee, and you would think, given her, like, the fact that she was a public defender, the fact that she graduated from these schools, and everyone who knows her speaks well of her.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. She seems like a good choice.
What do you think the Republicans are going to lean on against her? I feel like they always have an inroad somewhere.
Tucker Carlson this week on Fox News was like, well, yeah, sure, you have this resume, but what's your LSAT score? How come Joe Biden...
You're fucking lying to me.
Joe Biden never said...
Your LSAT score?
Yeah.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Harvard Law School graduate. But, let's see what you got on your qualifying
What's your
test.
ACT score?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't have a fucking podcast. Jesus. Tucker Carlson. I have a story for the bonus episode about Tucker Carlson in a personal way.
There was someone made a tweet like, okay, you want her LSAT score? Fine, but let's get all the other Supreme Court justices' LSAT. Like, let's see Amy Coney Barrett's LSAT score, because white supremacists, this is not going to end well for you.
Yeah. Because the whole thing of like, oh, you're only picking somebody based on their skin color really falls apart when you look at the history of people who've gotten on the Supreme Court based on their skin color.
I'm just really quickly. She graduated magna cum laude from Harvard University, graduated from Harvard's law school, clerked for a district judge, appellate judge, and Stephen Breyer, whom she would be replacing, worked at a high-paying corporate law firm, also served as a low-paid public defender. That's a resume.
And how old is she? Tell me she's like 37.
No, I mean, I wish she was like 12.
Yeah.
She's like 50-ish.
Okay, I'll take 50.
It's fine. Here's the only reason I bring her up.
Amy Coney Barrett, Miss Junior USA 2008.
Yeah. Here's the thing she said that, okay, after reading all of that and telling you all of that, here's the thing that stood out in her acceptance speech. And it's not a disqualifying statement. It's just like one of those things like, come on, you don't have to do this. She said, I must begin these very brief remarks by thanking God for delivering me to this point in my professional journey. My life has been blessed beyond measure. And I do know that one can only come this far by faith. And that part just...
Whatever.
I already knew your reaction to that. Here's why I didn't like it. She worked so freaking hard to get to this point. I want her to take the damn credit for it.
I think, I almost slammed my face into this microphone. I think that to give her like the most credit I know how to is maybe for her, faith is a like bigger. No, who cares? I'm not going to do whatever. She
I
said
don't
what she
care.
said. She means what she means.
Yes.
I don't give a shit.
Had she just said, "I want to thank God for bringing me here," which she did in the first sentence, I don't think I would have cared. It
if
was
she said, "Thank Xenu for bringing me here," I'd be like, "Thank God, there's a liberal woman on the Supreme Court."
Again, I do know that one can only come this far with faith. No, you came this far because you worked your ass off. Take credit for it.
Hammond?
So
gives
basically-
a shit? Because do you think she's going to get in the Supreme Court
Yes.
and be like, "Oh, I think maybe gay people shouldn't get married because they're not praying hard enough"? Like,
No,
this is
no.
the shit that people hate about us.
No, screw that. No, this is
Okay,
a fair
I know you're very
nitpick.
comfortable having people hate you, but I have a lot of depression and anxiety around people hating me, so I just need you to go with me on this one.
Fine.
It's fucking fine, dude. It is because unless she said, "My Lord Jesus Christ is the only way I'm going to answer anything. I'm going to flip open the New Testament and just point at something and be like, I don't know, I guess we have to stone this person to death for their white-collar crimes."
That is how the Supreme Court works.
That would be problematic. But saying, "I don't believe people can get here through faith,"
She didn't say I got here. She said you can't either. That is the interpretation I took.
Okay, I think that I would not be able to stand on my own 2 feet without a lot of friends around me, but you are proving me wrong
Yes.
time and
No,
time again.
you just proved me
have
right.
No friends and show up my house every week. I don't know what you're doing for the other 6.5 days a
No
week.
one does.
But
Let's talk about Ben
we
Carson.
can say things that are not literal, Hammond.
Anyway,
Stupid. I don't want to. I hate Ben Carson.
too bad. Okay, so this guy, Ben Carson,
Makes me so mad that he's a black neurosurgeon and just
Yep.
fucked everything up.
Yep, and Trump nominated him for Secretary of Housing and Urban Development.
Which is so funny and so racist. Also, Jay Farrow's imitation of him was top drawer. I think it was Jay Farrow. I hope I'm not getting that wrong.
Yeah. So he was invited to deliver the keynote address at the Air Force Academy's National Character and Leadership Symposium.
Quick, we can't have another white guy. What are we going to do?
And first of all, why is the Air Force Academy doing this? Why are they inviting this guy to talk of all your leaders?
It's an academy.
Well, okay, so
they're
the
allowed
Air
to have
Force-
fucking speakers, Hammond.
The Air Force Academy is notorious for being like an evangelical Christian hotbed in Colorado Springs.
Okay, well, here's the thing. You need to tell me those things before I
I'm
run
telling
off my
you now.
fucking mouth.
You interrupted along the way.
You talk
Anyway.
so slow.
So Ben Carson is speaking at this gig, and alone, all right, whatever, they can invite their Republican friends, whatever. But here's one of the things, his speech was whatever stump speech he always gives. At the very end, there was a short Q&A after this hour-long speech, and someone asked him a question about, how did God speak to you in your darkest times? Okay, whatever. I don't care if a kid asked that question or someone in the Air Force Academy asked that question. And I should tell you, the response Ben Carson gave is one he has given many times because he's told the same stories over the years.
Sure.
Part of his stump speech.
Yeah.
But I do want to point out what he said in response to, after talking about how his faith got him through a lot of tough times.
Okay.
Which is fine and I don't care.
Okay.
Here's what he said. And those people who like to criticize America and criticize people in America and are always talking about separation of church and state, which is not in the Constitution, by the way, do they realize that our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, talks about certain unalienable rights given to us by our Creator, a.k.a. God? Do they realize that the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag says we are one nation under God? That many courtrooms on the wall, it says, "In God we trust." Every coin in our pocket, every bill in our wallet says, "In God we trust." So if it's in our founding documents, it's in our pledge, it's on our courts, it's on our money, but we're not supposed to talk about it. What in the world is that? In medicine, we call it schizophrenia.
Oh, no! Oh, my God. That...
Took a weird turn at the end, right?
Could you? Okay, I
went
just want to
from-
be honest with everybody. I was thinking about my clever quip reply, and then I heard schizophrenia. I heard we call it schizophrenia. Can you tell me the
Yeah,
Lead
basically
up
he's
to
saying
that.
church-state separation is bullshit. It doesn't exist.
Right.
And we know that because God appears in the pledge and on our money and on the walls of courtrooms.
which you put there?
Which
God didn't put it
not
there,
only-
and the founding fathers did. Thomas
Thank you.
Jefferson did not
Right.
nail "In God We Trust" into your fucking courthouse.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Under God in the Pledge of Allegiance and in God we trust
Yeah.
on our money and dollar bills. That was all part of the 1950s, gotta distinguish ourselves from the Soviet Union, Cold War stuff.
They need to make a movie about that. And it needs to be a superhero movie because otherwise nobody will see it. And it's really important to me that people learn what happened in the 50s.
So the idea that he's using that as justification that we're a Christian nation and that separation of church and state doesn't exist. And then to top it off, to have a doctor say, like, I have a diagnosis for you. Which
and not just a doctor.
It wouldn't even... A neurosurgeon.
A neurosurgeon, which they don't work in schizophrenia.
Yeah,
they work in, like...
that type of doctor. And it's not even the right diagnosis.
I used to work for a neurosurgery nonprofit. Like, that's not how they do. They're not like, oh, this person's depressed. We're going to, like, drill into their brain. It's not like 1918 anymore.
And I want to repeat, this is not him giving a random talk somewhere. This is the Air Force Academy that invited this guy to deliver this speech about how we're a Christian nation.
Here's the thing that's really upsetting to me about this. And there's a lot that's genuinely quite upsetting. And, like, the fact that he is no longer he's no longer, Ben Carson's no longer, like, anything official.
He is not.
Just in terms of, like, I'm going to put in my mental health advocacy hat for a second. Schizophrenia is one of the not least understood, but popularly least understood mental illnesses there are. Like, people still think schizophrenia and multiple personality disorder, which is probably not a real thing, P.S. Schizophrenia and that are the same thing, and they're not. Schizophrenia is just, often people have trouble associating what's real and what isn't real, and it's really, really, really difficult for them and the people around them, and it requires a lot of diligent... I just have a person in my life who's schizophrenic, and this sort of bandying about of like, oh, you're a kooky person because you're schizophrenic. Like, schizophrenic people need our help and support and love and not our fear.
And they're not getting it from Ben Carson.
And if you are a medical professional known for neurological health, which is not the same as like therapy, we know, but like if you're bandying about like
the brain surgeon is the one saying this.
Yeah, like you can't, like I'm sorry, it's just so, it's so not okay. It is so immoral. And to say like, oh, those people are schizophrenic, as if people with schizophrenia are like not worthy of our attention and affection or what. You literally pulled out mail because you thought I was going to rant for so long. It's just this thing that we have of like, anybody who is X deserves our scorn. Oh, you're schizophrenic. Fuck you. Oh, you're depressed. Buck up. Like, that is terrible.
And it's not the first, it wasn't an ad lib because he said the same thing verbatim almost. The whole speech, I just told you, he said it all before many times, and literally no one in his life circle has ever said to him, like, man, maybe change your language on that.
Yeah, maybe stigmatizing people with mental illness is not the thing you should be doing, doctor.
By the way, I told you there was like a hotbed of evangelical Christianity. The previous keynote speakers for this for this particular event have included like a vice president of Chick-fil-A, the head of the right-wing legal group Liberty Institute, and I should say the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, which is not an atheist group, but they cover a lot of church-state separation cases, said very clearly his inviting him to deliver this like Christian nationalist promotional Christianity promotion speech that actually violates the Air Force's own policies. I just don't think anything's going to happen because of it. But anyway.
Wow.
All right. Here's the story
Christ.
for you. This is why I was breaking out the mail. Here's the question to ask. What percentage of federal prisoners in the United States are atheists?
Okay. Well, what we know, 10% of the population, of the general population is atheists?
So, no.
Oh.
4% of the general population are atheists who use that term.
Oh.
It's probably closer to 30% who have no organized religion.
Okay.
But 4% in the population would call themselves atheists. That's a Pew survey from last year.
Okay. So my guess is that prison generally underrepresents atheists for many reasons, not the least of which includes the fact that a lot of people, quote unquote, find Jesus in prison. So I'm going to say only 2% of people consider themselves atheists in prison.
I was wondering the answer. Because I've thought about this for a while, and several years ago, I tried to get real answers to this, but it had been a really long time.
Okay.
So I was kind of wondering, I wonder what the number is these days. So last summer, I filed a Freedom Information Act request.
FOIA'd it?
I FOIA'd it. And basically I said, I want to know the
That's
religious...
real journalism.
I know. Big quotation marks there. Basically I said, give me the religious breakdown of all federal prisoners, because you have that information, but it is not public anywhere. And I finally got a response like weeks ago. It took like 7-8 months to get it.
Wow, okay.
So I want you to,
Oh my
I'll show you a couple
God.
things. The first page is just a letter saying, we got your FOIA request. This is our response to you. It doesn't say, you don't have to read anything there.
You don't want me to read your address?
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay.
But that first page is just a cover letter saying we got something. Second page is a breakdown by every federal prison, which no one can read. They sent me one page of like a 30-page spreadsheet, like just laid out. I cannot read it, even with a microscope. I don't know what any of that says. Thank you, government.
I feel like if I had enough time, I could probably figure most of these out.
It tells me the religious breakdown for every single federal prison, but it's really hard to read.
Okay, so it's
But you can ignore that page. It's not important.
This page?
The one with 100 million things on it.
Oh, this one is important.
The third page they sent me was just the overall numbers. And so let's talk about a couple things here. You see on that paper that you're looking at, and I'll post a link in the show notes here. On the left side, it lists the various religious categories they have and how many prisoners follow that number. What's the number at the very bottom for the total number of federal prisoners altogether?
Total number of federal prisoners
It's like 139.
Yeah, 139,002. Excuse me, 139,002.
Right, so that's how many federal prisoners there are. How many atheists are there?
143.
Yep, 143. And if you do the math there, that is 0.1%.
Wow.
0.1%. We're 4% of the population, and we are 0.1% of the federal prison system.
So do you think unknown?
Hold that thought for a second.
Okay, yeah.
We'll get to
I won't
all
get
of
ahead of
that.
you.
So that's one thing.
It's really
And by
cool,
the way,
man.
I want to point out here, we are going to talk in just a second about all the reasons you should totally ignore all of this stuff, because there's so many caveats with all of this. But yeah, 0.1% of the population
There's more
are atheists.
Mormons in prison than atheists.
Yeah, right? Like, there's a lot.
Color me surprised.
There's more of like every group than atheists.
I've known a lot of Mormons, and I'm worse than all of them.
I should also say, like, the last time I did this was like I did it in 2013 and 2015. The number has not changed at all. It's roughly the same percentage. So that's part one. Here's the other thing that was interesting to me, and here's a little story for you. A couple of years ago, actually like 2015, there was a humanist. There was a guy in prison who is an atheist who basically said, hey, isn't it weird that if I wanted to have a Bible study, put it down for a second, hold that thought for a second. If I wanted to have a Bible study, like the federal prison I'm in allows me to like reserve meeting space, like I'm on a college club or something. They let me have meeting space for a Bible study. The Christians are allowed to do that. As an atheist, he is not allowed to do that.
Did we interview this gentleman?
We may. I don't remember if it was this one or someone else.
It was a terrible interview.
But here's another thing. What if a handful of people want to get together to discuss their faith? If you're Christian, you're allowed to do that. 10 of you can get together to discuss something. But as atheists, you cannot get together to discuss, say, like a Carl Sagan book. So in 2015...
Or just a romance novel or whatever, you know?
Or whatever. The American Humanists Association eventually filed a lawsuit saying that's religious discrimination. You can't not allow this guy to have the same perks as you're giving to religious groups.
Sure.
Because the argument from the prison is like, we can't have too many prisoners in one spot. That's a safety concern. Unless you're meeting to discuss the Bible, in which case it's fine.
It's like smokers' breaks all over again. Because I don't smoke, I don't get a break. Fuck you.
Right. And so basically, the long story of that is a few years ago, the Federal Bureau of Prisons basically said, okay, we will reach a settlement with you. We are going to say that humanism counts as a religion for our purposes. Hold that thought, you're glaring at me. Humanism counts as a religion, and if this prisoner wants to declare himself a humanist, which we're now allowing him to do, even though we didn't before, he now has access to the same perks as all the religious inmates as well.
Okay.
And both sides said, fine, we'll take that deal, we'll end the lawsuit. But here's the thing about that. That meant for the first time with this FOIA request, it actually lists the number of federal prisoners who decide to call themselves humanists.
Oh.
And that's a really interesting one because atheist is one thing, but saying, no, I actually have a pre-written like moral code.
Do you think that's what humanism is?
Yeah, it's atheism, but it's like, I'm not just saying I don't believe in God. Here's what I do believe in. And so we actually have a number of humanists. So how many humanists are on this list?
Oh, can I look again?
You can look now.
You shouldn't give a person with ADD
I'm
something
sorry.
to read. What was I looking up? I forgot immediately.
Humanists. How many humanists are in federal prison?
63.
63, like that's it, which represents 0.045% of prisoners. That is, I think, half of 1%.
There is also something else interesting that I am wanted to point out. That they also break it down by male and female prison populace.
How many humanists are men? Of the 63 humanists, how many of them are men?
Obviously 63. You had to know that.
I did know that. Yes.
Atheists, out of the 143, 5 are female. Wow, we really really show up, huh?
Yeah. Okay, so here's a couple. Let's talk about the caveats here. And here's the thing I'm worried about. As much as I want to have this information because I find it interesting, it's also worth pointing out that the reason I've seen some people try to use this information is to say, look, we're underrepresented in the prison system, and that suggests atheists are more moral than religious people or some version
which
of
isn't
that.
anything.
Which isn't. Yeah, you're right. And so let's talk about a couple things here.
Okay.
We don't know why these people are in prison.
Correct.
I think there is, at least I'll speak for myself here, the gut reaction is everyone in federal prison is in there for like murder. That's just not the case.
Absolutely not the case.
Like, as much as I could say, like, they're there for white collar crimes.
Quick sidebar, have you watched the documentary Attica?
No. I think I know what you're talking about, but I have not seen the documentary.
So good. It's about a prison uprising in Attica, New York, very famously. And it's
It just had
incredible.
the 50th anniversary.
It did, and it's this doc was nominated for an Academy Award.
Yeah.
Mikey and I watched it the other night. It's so good.
And people
so good.
are put in there for drug charges,
yeah.
possession. Like, it's stupid shit that is not worth, like, saying they're less moral than you.
There was one kid in there who was in there for like 90 days because he wrote a bad check, and he was in like the worst federal prison in New York State. Like, this is what it.
So
I hate.
So you can't make a moral argument because you don't know why all these people are in there.
And
That's
it implies
one thing.
that the law is moral, which
it implies the justice system works, which it doesn't.
Does
it
not.
implies that it doesn't take into account that if you come from a high poverty rate, a place with a high poverty rate and low formal education, there's a really good chance you're going to end up in prison. Higher chance you're going to end up in prison. And by the way, a lower chance that you're going to be an atheist because atheism tends to attract the sort of people who come from high income, high education, that sort of community too. So like we're working from a different starting point in a lot of cases to begin with. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You don't know why everyone's in prison. Don't make a moral argument with this. Another thing, all of those identifications are self-reported, and self-reporting your religious beliefs is a weird game, as anyone who does surveys can tell you, because everyone has different reasons for using religious labels that they do. So if you look on that list, atheist is there, humanist is there, but like if you don't believe in God, there are other categories you might put yourself in. There is a category for no preference.
Moorish.
That's a religion. It's a smaller one. I don't know enough about it.
I only know it
but
from like
there's other.
Moors.
Other is a category. You might just list yourself as other.
Preference is 37,000 people.
Yeah, it's a lot. Unknown. Actually, no preference is, I think, the single biggest number on that list. Unknown is another one. So the people
What's non-trin? N-O-N-T.
Non-Trinitarian. It's a type of Christian. I don't know enough about it. But like, there are other places.
I don't know as much about religion as I would hope.
It's all good. There's
paganism.
a lot of things.
Here's what I'm shocked about.
Yes.
Pagans. There's 3,600 of them.
Yeah.
Guess how many are men? Guess how many are women?
Oh, I did not look at this. 3,500 to 100.
That's almost exactly 3,520 to 148.
Boom.
Which I guess what I kind of wish I could see instead of the total men and total women. I would rather be able to see like the population or the percentage rather of like 3% of women are atheists, 3% of men are atheists. Just the numbers are off because it's apples and oranges.
But also, like, I wonder how many atheists who don't believe in God, even if they don't use that term, might have just told whenever they filled out the survey. I don't know if that's one of those things you type in when you are booked into the system. I don't know if it reflects people who, let's say you've been there for 30 years. Does the religious label, is it the one you gave when you first entered prison, or is this a new thing? I don't know when it was taken.
Gather data transparently, it's hard to draw any large conclusions.
Thank you.
Huh,
yeah.
Weird.
So we don't know when this stuff was taken. We don't know if like atheists said, no, I'm Christian or I'm Catholic or I'm Protestant.
Because people say that to get people off their back.
That too, yeah.
Especially if they're like, I was raised Catholic, I'm not anymore, I'm Catholic. I don't feel like fucking talking to you about your religion, dude. I'm Catholic too. Great.
Keep in mind, this is a federal prison system. There are benefits to saying you are religious, not just you get to meet for Bible study and you get
Judaism.
It's there somewhere. There are benefits to saying you're religious because you get perks. Oh, yeah. There are some times when you can go on like quote unquote field trips to a ministry or to a church or to a church run program because you are listed as Christian that you might not get other way around. And that's a legal issue that we could talk about later. But that exists. So that's part one of why you might want to say you're religious. And also, maybe you would think if I tell you I believe in God or I'm a man of God, maybe it gets me a reduced sentence down the line.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you think I'm a changed man down the line.
Oh, parole boards love finding religion.
So it's a risky bet to even say as an atheist that you're an atheist behind bars. Dateline's not going to do a special on like a pastor who murders someone, then gives up his faith in prison and then says, I just realized I had to do good because this is the only life we have. That's not going to happen.
No, it's stupid.
Keep in mind, another thing, this is the federal prison system. It does not take into account state prisons, county, local jails, and those are more populated than the U.S. federal prison system.
Oh, I see.
So again, all of that stuff, those are all caveats to keep in mind. Do not say this number proves atheists are more moral than other people. I would say, however, it is useful because I think a lot of religious apologists, pastors, might imply, in lack of better words, they might say that you need God to be good. And if prison is one of the ways they want to define goodness, which, like we just said, I don't know that that's a fair thing to say.
No, most of us wouldn't.
Then here you go. Atheists are underrepresented in prison compared to the general population. Like, not even by a little bit. It's by a ton.
And what I think is interesting about that is I feel like 10 years ago, I would see data like that and just do the whole confirmation bias thing. Like, see, atheists are generally good people. You can't tell us you had to be good. And like now that I'm older and a little bit wiser, like I understand that it's not that simple. And there's, like you said, mitigating circumstances of what people are going to say.
So many. If you are looking for a way, if you're ever looking for like the atheists are more moral argument, I would not use this necessarily. Maybe as one data point of many if you want, but not even. But Phil Zuckerman, the sociologist, wrote a book a couple of years ago called What It Means to Be Moral. The subtitle, Why Religion is Not Necessary for Living an Ethical Life.
Okay.
And I want to read you just one brief excerpt from there where he talks about like the different metrics for morality you could use in terms of who supports helping refugees, affordable health care for all, accurate sex education, death with dignity, gay rights, transgender rights, animal rights, and as to who opposes militarism, the government use of torture, the death penalty, corporal punishment, and so on, the correlation remains. The most secular Americans exhibit the most care for the suffering of others, while the most religious exhibit the highest levels of indifference. Basically saying there are so many ways you could judge morality. Right. Any one of them, maybe you could nitpick like we are doing here. But if you want to take it as a whole, we do pretty damn well. Now, there are reasons for that. Atheism as a philosophy tends to attract a different type of person because you don't need the church community to help you out. And a lot of people do. You are coming from a place where you have the free time to read books or go on the internet or listen to stupid ass podcasts.
Yep.
Whatever it is.
Great podcast.
Thank you. you have that ability to do that sort of stuff. And if you're, working 23 hours a day and trying to take care of your kids and all that, you don't necessarily, and you don't have any money, it's actually harder to even find the tools you might need to explore your theological views and all that stuff.
100%.
So just keep that in mind. I say it's a long way of saying, hey, here's some cool information I found. Here's why you should ignore it.
Stop paying attention to it. Stop being so fucking happy.
Yeah.
This is cool though.
Here's one last story for you. I'm actually going to skip over a couple others because this one I just found fascinating. I've been waiting to listen to the new podcast, The Trojan Horse Affair, because I was waiting for like a long road trip. It's an 8-part series, came out from the New York Times. It's by the same people who made Serial and S-Town and the Nice White People, I think, like a couple of years ago.
I think it's Nice White People.
Sorry if I got the title wrong, but like it's quality people whose podcasts have been amazing. So this podcast comes out about a month ago. 8 parts dropped in one day. And I'm like, okay, when I go on a road trip, this is the great thing to like binge listen to.
Nice White Parents.
Nice White Parents. There you go. And then I had a reason last week where I'm like, oh shit, I should listen to this now. So I started listening and oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah.
I am going to give you spoilers right now. So for anyone listening, just keep that in mind. Skip to the next story,
I can't
whatever.
do that though.
You don't get to do that. I won't give away too much. I'll tell you the gist of it.
Okay.
The gist of it is like in 2014, this is all stuff you learn in the first few minutes of the first episode.
Okay.
That basically in England, in the UK, there are religious schools, but they get to function as public schools, even though they have like a religious bent. You wouldn't see that in the US. You do see that there. And in some parts of like outside London, there were some schools that catered to predominantly Muslim community. And so they ran their schools as like a Muslim school.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean you indoctrinate them into Islam, but it means they incorporated prayer time in there. They spoke about the Quran in a way that like you probably wouldn't see in a secular school. And there are issues with that, which we could talk about too. But what happened is one of the worst schools by the government's metrics, because these are technically public schools, one of the worst schools was one of those schools.
A Muslim ones?
A Muslim one. And basically a guy came in, changed it, made it one of the best schools, like a model school that the government said, holy crap, y'all need to do what he's doing because it's really working and the test scores are better, kids are doing better, it's all well and good. Next thing you know, a letter hits like the city council. It's a long letter that basically says, this is part of a plot to Islamicize the public schools. And this guy right over here, he's doing it.
Wait, Islamicized?
Like, yeah.
I thought it was already an Islamic school.
Technically, it's a public school, but they made it a welcoming environment for Muslims.
Okay.
But they were saying, no, that's not what this is. This guy is trying to like radicalize these students into like Islamic extremism. And they spoke to this guy in the podcast and he's like, that's not what I was doing. And here's what I was doing. And they point out like there are some legit criticisms of the methods you used here. And some of the stuff he has answers for, some of the stuff he does not have good answers for. But his basic argument is, I was trying to help these students meet them where they're at. And you know what? It worked. And as soon as I started doing well, people started coming after us.
Oh, you mean as soon as something gets popular and good, everybody hates it? That's so strange.
And the thing about this letter that suggested he's radicalizing schools, and this is part of a bigger plot, like a terrorist type of plot. Let's say it's a 6-page letter. The first page is missing, so you don't really know who it's addressed to. And the last page is missing, so you don't know who wrote the letter. And so basically you have the middle part of a letter making all these wild accusations.
Against this guy.
Against this dude and other schools that are supposedly doing this.
Okay. And he's not a solo act. He's like on behalf of a something, or is he on his own?
He's kind of on his own, but he's tight with the Muslim community.
Okay.
And basically the city council and the government basically say, holy crap, there's some shadiness going on here. And they start taking action to undo this Islamicization of the schools. And this guy is basically like, you ruined this thing I was doing. You ruined the school. You shut down the school that I was running. But also it affected the Muslim community at large because people thought Islamic extremism is basically creeping into our area and we got to do something about it. And one of the guys reporting this story was a dude affected by this personally because he's Muslim. And that's how the story came to their attention at the New York Times. I'm saying that this is all stuff you learned early on, but the big question is, well, who wrote this letter that got the ball rolling?
It was you, wasn't it?
Yeah, clearly. And the guy writing is like, I don't know for a fact who wrote this letter. I have a hunch.
We still don't know.
Well, I'm not going to answer that question. The whole podcast is, can we figure out who wrote this letter?
I see.
Why is everyone taking it seriously if you don't even know who wrote it? How come no one seems to care who wrote this letter? And then they investigate the claims made in the letter too, because there is some truth, but there's also a lot of things they could easily debunk.
Right.
And here's the reason I bring it up on this particular podcast. You listen to 4 episodes, it's a pretty strong case to make to answer some of the questions I just raised. But then in episode like 5 of the 8, one of the things that comes up is that some of the people who are working at the schools named in that Trojan horse letter that no one could figure out, like the Muslims are using like Trojan horse style infesting this thing. One of the people who said there is radical Islam creeping into the schools and we got to do something about it. And we know this because we work at these schools. Because people who are not Muslim would work at these schools too. Yeah. They were like, who do we tell about this? And they said, well, we'll tell the British Humanists Association, now known as Humanists UK, which is like their version of the American Humanists Association. And they said, this stuff is going on. And the British Humanist Association at the time basically took a lot of their claims, according to the podcast, they took a lot of these claims and brought it to the attention of government officials saying, this shit's going on, you ought to investigate. And the question, like, it doesn't have to do directly with that Trojan horse letter, but when you add the Trojan horse letter implications with these things these people said were going on where their concern is like they're segregating boys and girls when they shouldn't be. They're teaching them things that follow an conservative Islamic interpretation, but also you shouldn't be doing this in a public school. And they're raising all these concerns that we would call like church-state separation concerns, and they bring it to the government. The government's saying, see, it confirms what we already were thinking with the Islamicization of the schools. Right. And these things go on top of each other. So the hosts of the show speak to the people who went to the British Humanist Association. They speak to one of the leaders of Humanists UK saying like, did you verify that this stuff was happening in the schools as these people told you it was? Because not all of it was happening. Oh. And like, didn't you fact check these things before you made the problem worse? And basically their response on the podcast is, well, we looked into it as much as we could, but really we just passed it on. We were like the messengers is what I took away from it. Okay. Is like one of the leaders is like, yeah, we passed it along to them. And like, it's not our responsibility to do the fact checking on this. And the hosts of the show, including the Muslim host, is like, what are you doing? And at one point, the guy from Humanists UK says, like, what's the harm here? What really came of all this? I'm paraphrasing. Ooh. And the host basically blows up.
Excuse me, humanists cannot say what's the harm. That's our line that we use on everybody else.
Yeah, I want to find the exact thing that he said, like the what's the actual thing that he said? What impact did it have? Our letter that we sent off to the government saying, here's what's all happening. Like, what impact did it have? And the Muslim host is like,
gestures broadly
at everything. And he's like, it hurt the Muslim community in our area, more or less. Humanists UK, the reason I bring all this up is like about a week ago, Humanists UK sent out an email. The headline is Humanists UK comment on misleading Trojan Horse Affair podcast. Their argument is you're making us out to be Islamophobic. They're like, we're not Islamophobic. We have genuine church-state separation concerns, but the way the podcast edited the interview that we did and the way they presented the information made it sound like we were indifferent to the treatment of Muslims in the community or that we were oblivious to how this affected everyone. And like, certainly we are not Islamophobic. It's a weird thing to read because, listen, they go into this. It's one of those emails that's so long that at the bottom of Gmail, it says the message is clipped, view the entire message. Because like, it's long. They do have recordings of their side of the interviews, like the raw footage. Oh. It doesn't change anything, but it does show you like, okay, here's what's going on. But like, honestly, I was listening to the episode and I came away from the original reporting saying, yeah, it doesn't make them look great. but also it doesn't make them look like they were out to get Muslims.
Yeah, it sounds like they did kind of shoddy research.
It did sound like they did shoddy research and they don't want to take responsibility for their role in it. And again, you're talking about the same people who think Richard Dawkins is not Islamophobic either, or the sort of people who say Richard Dawkins is not transphobic.
Well,
I would argue that I don't think he sets out to do any of those things, but his statements are really irresponsible. And so this is kind of the thing. I don't really have an opinion on this because, one, I'm not reading this giant letter they wrote in response. It's really long. And also, I didn't come away from it thinking anything bad of them in the first place.
Sure.
But I would say, if any of you are going to listen to the podcast, listen to it because it's a good story and it's by reporters who are really good at putting together podcast series like this. Keep in mind that this plays a role into how people perceive the humanists in the UK specifically, but also humanists at large, because you have a group that purports to care about church-state separation. I've reported on a lot of the stuff they've done. They do really friggin' good work. But also, when you hear a Muslim who is relatively progressive, you can tell from this stuff, but also he lives in this community and he knows how this stuff affects Muslims at large, saying the thing you think is like church-state separation, it's not just that. And the things you were talking about, they're saying we didn't do, we weren't trying to do. And for you to ignore that, you fed in to a broader thing. And this is one of the arguments I feel like I've seen from ex-Muslim groups or who get a lot of platforming from atheist groups where they're like, let's get rid of the hijab. We got to talk about what it's like to leave religion when you're Muslim.
Right.
And I'm sympathetic to all of that stuff. And at the same time, it's like that stuff doesn't carry a lot of weight when it comes to a lot of practicing Muslims who don't really care what they have to say about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
and how you
that's
talk
the
about
same
that.
For Christianity as well?
Less so, I think. Because I think it's a lot easier because there's a lot more people who are leaving Christianity and understand that stuff.
Oh, sure.
But for Islam, which a lot of people don't know much about, and for atheists, again, I'm sympathetic to the argument. Like hijabs, should we have to wear them? Should we have policies about that stuff?
No.
You know,
No,
don't
we
ask
shouldn't
me.
have policies about hijabs.
I don't have
No.
a stake in the matter, but I do understand when ex-Muslims say you don't really have a choice in the matter in some
Right.
communities.
Right.
And at the same time, there are plenty of progressive Muslims who are like, I'm wearing it by choice.
Right.
But again, this is kind of the issue that the Humanists UK took away from this, which is you're painting us out to be Islamophobic. We are here to argue that that's not what we are doing. And yet, in the process of doing that, and this is what you hear in the podcast,
Right.
they came away, at least to the host, whose story is being presented, and it's one-sided by nature. That's the nature of the podcast.
Sure.
As much reporting as they try to do. But it comes away feeling like these people, either they did not care about the implications of what they were saying or doing, or they didn't think it made a difference in the long run, which it did.
Right.
And if you're not taking that viewpoint into account when you are saying and doing these things, you end up pissing off a lot of allies in the process.
Yeah.
And that's a thing to keep in mind. I just want to repeat, I didn't come away from this thinking badly of Humanists UK as much as they seem to think people did. Because that's why they wrote such a forceful letter in response.
And long.
And very long and very detailed because they felt they had to be. And that's not the take I had from it. But also, this is a perception that a lot of people are going to take away, I think, listening to the podcast, that these people were indifferent, didn't care. And I'm very curious to hear from people who have listened to the podcast and heard it the whole way through, because the Humanist UK thing really was the bulk of one episode out of 8, and it did not come back later on. I'm very curious what people thought about their portrayal in this thing. All right, that's my soapbox on that one.
Awesome.
I got nothing else here.
That's all you have?
I have a couple others that are not important.
Okay. Before we go, I want to read my subject list for our bonus episode.
Ooh, yes.
I'm going to keep doing this until somebody tells me they're annoyed by it. Basically, I write, 5 or 6 or 7 topics for our bonus episode, and Hemi gets to pick them, and I'm just going to let you know what I have on the docket. The Faux Spring of Chicago, the show The Gilded Age, my story about my feetsies getting hurt, the New York Times Games app.
Again?
I don't think we talked about it last time. I think
We
you
100% talked about it last time.
Fine. I just really like it and enjoy talking to you about it. Love is Blind Season 2. I finished it. I want to talk about it. And a fun story about Tucker Carlson that I forgot to tell you.
Okay.
Those are my topics. You can always find me on Twitter at Jess Blumke. You can email us at friendlyatheistpodcast@gmail.com. We do read all of your emails. Hemant usually responds to them. I don't.
And I'm at Hemant Mehta on Twitter. Go to onlysky.media. Go to YouTube, the Friendly Atheist channel on YouTube. You can listen to this in the background while you're doing whatever it is you do.
Patreon.com/Friendly Atheist Podcast. We've got a gajillion bonus episodes from me and Hemant, me and my husband Mikey, me and various other people, just bullshitting about life and art and books and movies and shit we've watched. So yeah, dig in. What, $5 a month?
Yep.
Oh, hours of entertainment for $5 a month.
Yes.
So still at thrice the price.
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes.
Goodbye.
Bye.